Cool. Cool, cool, cool. Well, let's get started then. This is Saturn Girl, and we have a really important day coming up. That's right, on March 29th, we're about to have a solar eclipse in Aries. In fact, it's the final solar eclipse of the previous eclipse phase, where the lunar nodes were in Aries and Libra. So, what is a solar eclipse? Well, it's a new moon that occurs within 15 degrees of the lunar nodes. In this case, it's the north node. Now, the north node has since gone into Pisces as of January, the south node into the opposite sign Virgo, obviously. So, this is sort of an out of sign eclipse, right? Because it's a new moon at the very end of Aries. So, now, what is an eclipse phase? Well, an eclipse phase, as I consider it, is the period of time, about a year and a half, in which a certain pair of signs is hosting the lunar nodes, right? Previously, it was Aries and Libra. This time, it's Pisces and Virgo. So we're going to see the eclipses oscillate between those two signs. Now, what does this mean? Well, eclipse phases to me represent a phase in your development. The houses, the whole sign houses that are being highlighted will indicate the area of life that will be emphasized for that year and a half period. So you want to take note of what whole sign houses Aries and Libra are for you, and then which ones Pisces and Virgo are, because you'll be able to discern a bit more about what this eclipse means for you. Now, as I said, the nodes, the lunar nodes, changed signs back in January. Now, the lunar nodes are the eclipsing places because they are the points where the moon's orbit intersects the Earth's. Therefore, it's the place where sun, moon, and Earth align as seen from Earth. Therefore, when all those align, we get what? An eclipse, don't we? And this is a north node eclipse, as I said earlier, because the north node is, well, they're not co-present in the same sign, but they're conjunct, yes, within a 15-degree orb. It's a partial solar eclipse when it's a bit of a wider orb, you see. Now, the north node was said to increase things, right? Both the good and the bad. While the south node was said to decrease things. Again, both the good and the bad. So what we've seen throughout this past year and a half period is the area of your life indicated by the whole sign house Aries is for you amplified, right? For good or for ill. But that area of life was pumped up. It was increased. And you may have experienced abundance or just having to pay way too much attention to that area of life. The interesting thing about all this is, like I said, it's the final solar eclipse in Aries, right? It represents the final form or transformation that you've been going through as the North Node has been transiting Aries. Now, I want you to remember that Saturn has been going through Pisces since March of 2023. I mean, that's pretty close to the time this eclipse, or the previous eclipse phase in Aries and Libra started. So I want you to think back to what's been going on in your life since that time that has to do with the whole sign house that Aries is for you. Now, like I said, the North Node has entered Pisces. And at the end of May, just after my birthday, Saturn will enter Aries. So it's like the North Node and Saturn changed signs, isn't it? Now, the way I interpret that is the North Node went through and pumped up that area of life that Aries is for you. I mean, whole sign houses. We do whole sign houses here. If you got a problem with that, go somewhere else, okay? And I refer to Saturn as she, and in the feminine way, because Dorotheus of Sidon did in the 1st century, and I want to too. So if you got a problem with that, okay. Now, as I was saying, it's like Saturn and the North Node are switching signs or switching places, trading places, right? That's one of my favorite movies, $1. It's an 80s movie. You probably never heard of it. Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy. Very good. Hilarious. Anyway. So they're changing places. They're trading places. The North Node went through Aries and pumped up that house. Meanwhile, Saturn's going to enter in this summer and depress it. Saturn is going to sit on the area of life, make it heavy, and test you, give you trials and challenges. It's basically like she's saying, oh yeah, you think you did well in that area of life? You think you had some increase? Well, let me test how well you built. So it's almost like those bridges where they test how much weight they can take. I firmly believe that you're never given more than you can handle in life. Well, I guess there's plenty of examples of me being wrong with that. However, I want you to keep that sort of attitude, that this is a test and that you can pass this test. Now, in my case, I'm Aquarius rising, so Aries is my 3rd house. My voice was greatly amplified since March of 2023. I did more content creation, and I had more people, albeit not very many, paying attention. So it was like my voice was amplified, like I found my voice. Meanwhile, Saturn's going to enter in right after my birthday and be like, oh yeah, you think you're loud? You think you make a stir? Well, let me see how much I can stifle your voice and see how well you can push through it, right? I might have to shout through a brick wall for all I know. So, I want you to pay attention here, because it will be like you get added stress, added testing, added obstacles, and added trials in that area of life. But what does astrology teach us? Well, like Vedius Valens in the 2nd century said, it teaches us to be ready for whatever comes, to accept our fate, and to learn to endure it with a certain amount of equanimity. As Vedius Valens said, to neither rejoice excessively in the case of the good, nor become depressed in the case of the bad. You can see the Stoic philosophy from ancient Greece, It's like, just trudge through it, So, we can maintain a fatalistic attitude to a certain extent. Like, yeah, 99% of life is fated and just happens to us. I made that number up, but you feel me? The 1% that matters is the ability to direct our attention and to make choices, how you respond to the events in life. I call that destiny. It's not guaranteed, but you have an opportunity to do your destiny, or what we might call your dharma, your duty while you're here, you see? Now, excuse me, for your benefit here, and for you in particular, I'm going to go ahead and do some horoscopes for you, okay? Based on the rising signs, of course. And we do this for the rising signs because that's what determines the houses in your chart, right? Especially the whole sign houses. So let's start. Let's go to, well, first take a look here. You see, we see the moon in Pisces, don't we? The Pisces moon. And then she's going to move forward, right? Hours and hours and hours. And look at that. Boom! Look, we have the solar eclipse in Aries. Now, I was wrong. It's not in late Aries. It's in, early Aries. Let's go ahead a few more hours. You see? There we go. 8 degrees of Aries. And you'll notice here, right, we have 3 degrees left in Pisces. And then 8 degrees here, 3 plus 8 is what? 11, right? 11. So they're 11 degrees away, which is still within that 15-degree orb that creates an eclipse. Okay? Now, let's go back to your horoscopes. Let's start with Aries. Aries rising. You see, this is the final solar eclipse in your first house. The solar eclipses since March of 2023 and now have been bouncing in between your first and seventh house, Aries Libra. That eclipse phase highlights your identity and your relationships. Since the North Node has been going through your first house, you may have had new beginnings in terms of your identity, right? You may have experienced some amplification in how you experience yourself. Perhaps health issues were highlighted. Meanwhile, the South Node was in Libra. You may have gone through a big breakup or some significant relationship challenges. Now the nodes are entering the 12th and 6th house. And that's sort of the cocoon phase of your life, right? You're going to have to confront mental health issues and integrate all the challenges to your sense of identity and your relationship to others in this next phase, right? Of Pisces and Virgo. So Saturn is going to be coming out of your 12th house, which is big isolation. It feels really crappy. It feels like you're taken out of, public life and like you just have to sit and contemplate and possibly face your self-destructive behavior that's held you back. Now, Saturn switching places with the North Node is going to challenge your sense of self that you've cultivated. A lot of times we get a certain amount of melancholy. We get a little depressed. We get more mature. We feel our own mortality. We feel like we're getting thin. We're becoming aware of death. And typically our physical appearance changes drastically. When I was going through this phase, I came out as trans, So be aware of that. Now let's move on to Taurus rising. So for Taurus rising, the past eclipse phase for you was the cocoon phase, right? The eclipses were bouncing back and forth between the 12th and 6th house. You had your sense of isolation being amplified. Perhaps you had to take time out. You had to integrate the lessons you learned from 2022. And you may have been healing both mental health and physical health issues. Now, with Saturn going through your 11th house, it created a distance between you and your interests, your friends, like-minded people, and it probably made you feel like you weren't getting a lot of support. Now, with Saturn going through the 12th house, it's going to make you feel a bit isolated. The progress you made with self-destructive behavior is going to be tested. Yeah? How well can you keep your cool in the midst of temptations, of confidence? You may have built up some confidence over the previous phase, and now you're being challenged on it. It will feel isolated. Yeah? I know when I went through this, I went through divorce. I'm not saying it's going to be that drastic. However, there is a sense of being in exile, of having to contemplate, to be alone, sometimes feeling confined or even imprisoned. For me, I had to move out to the sticks with some friends during my divorce. It was far away from everything, and we didn't even have a dryer. So, to me, I'm such a bougie, so. Anyway. So just be aware that the phase coming up for you will be the 11th and 5th house phase. That's all about coming out into the light of day, right? It's all about learning to have fun again and to be a butterfly, to come out of your cocoon and your shell. So that's optimistic, isn't it? That'll be a good, welcome change. However, Saturn's really going to push you on that. At the same time you feel like getting out and having fun, Saturn is going to make you feel isolated and unconfident, quite frankly. And you're going to have to push through that. And you have to be comfortable with yourself and what you've learned about yourself. But anyway, let's move on to Gemini rising. So for Gemini rising, The North Node had been transiting your 11th house, right? This was the previous phase, which I call the light of day, right? You went through some big transformations on how you view like-minded people, the groups you belong to, and people who support you. You may have had more optimism during this time. You may have felt more like you had vision for the future. You may have felt more like you had a sense of direction or idealism, like you had specific work to do. Meanwhile, Saturn going through the 10th house made you feel stifled in your career, made you feel like you lost your direction, perhaps, made you feel like you hit your glass ceiling, or like you've missed out on opportunities. It's sort of like our life path has reached the end of its course. And like the previous life path, it isn't working for you. It's not matching with your values, you see. So oftentimes, we'll miss opportunities, we'll lose our jobs, we'll feel trapped in our jobs. And then, towards the end of this, so coming up between now and the summer, oftentimes new opportunities present themselves. But with Saturn going into the 11th house, you'll probably feel a sense of being left alone, not getting support from anyone, having to figure out things yourself, and possibly feel alienated from the previous groups or friend groups or interest groups that you belonged to before. Excuse me. The next eclipse phase you're entering, though, is all about your life direction. So you're going to see your living situation and your life direction totally change in this phase. So get to work, because this is one of the biggest phases of your life, you see. The angular houses, the 1st, 7th, 10th, and 4th in the eclipse cycle, represent the most important crescendos, okay? The most important climaxes. But let's move forward to Cancer rising. So for Cancer rising, these eclipses have been bouncing back and forth between your 10th and 4th house, right? I call this the manifestation phase. You see, the North Node's been going through your 10th house, and maybe it pumped up that area of life a little bit, or it amplified the tensions in that area of life. Either way, you've probably noticed a complete redirection of your life path or your life direction. Please allow myself to introduce myself. Yeah, anyway. Meanwhile, the other eclipses have been going through your 4th house. So you also may have had to move or experience a change in your living situation. You see? I call this the manifestation phase. It's where you put all the previous ideals and idealism into practical use, into practice in your actual material life. So that's why we see big job changes and big residence changes. When I went through this, I quit my job of 20 years to do this, and I moved out of state, right, to where I am now, right, an undisclosed location. So I want you to be very aware of this, because Saturn went through your 9th house, deconstructing your beliefs, and Saturn will enter your 10th house, sitting on that life path. And what she's showing you is that your values no longer align with your life path. You've been going through a deconstruction of what you believe. Maybe you've been handling tension with a partner from a foreign country, or, a foreign trip, or foreign culture, or foreign language in some way. But typically what I see is our values being deconstructed. We find out that what we believed before doesn't make any sense. So this is going to redirect your life path over the next several years. So strap in, because life is about to feel like a strap on. Okay? Boom, boom. But let's move forward to our Leo rising friends. I love Leo risings. I really do. I have a lot of exes who are Leo risings. But anyway, so for you, dear Leo rising, the last eclipse phase was the 9th and 3rd house phase. This is what I've been in, right? Because I'm Aquarius rising, the opposite sign. And this phase represents the reflection, right? It's the phase following the manifestation phase. So we see the reflection thing going on, don't we? We sort of evaluate how well we manifested. We evaluate how well that sort of thing aligned with what we believe. We get more reflective. We start thinking about our impact, our influence in the world, and what it means. We start considering a sense of meaning. It's sort of like decompressing after all that energy of the previous phase, you see? So Saturn had been going through your 8th house, which brings losses, sometimes financial losses, and other times it brings actually losing people, or we deal with criminal stuff. We deal with fear, right? We deal with resentment and things we've been holding on to. Meanwhile, the North Node going through your 9th house perhaps gave you a new direction in what you believe, right? And maybe you've explored new philosophy, new spirituality, or new politics. Saturn's going to come in and test you on that when Saturn enters Aries. Saturn's going to say to you, why do you believe this? Show me what your beliefs actually do. You got to put your beliefs into practical use, you see? You have to explore and see if they really, really make sense to you. And if they help you to navigate the world with a sense of empathy, a sense of intelligence, and an awareness of love. Love isn't an emotion in this context. It's the progressive realization of your interconnectedness with the rest of existence, you see? Puzzle that out for yourself and see what that means for you. Okay? So, this is important because your voice, like me, has probably been amplified, but the emphasis has been on what you believe and why. Now let's move on to Virgo rising. So for our Virgo rising friends, the eclipses in Aries had been in your 8th house. You see, you were in the 2nd and 8th house phase. This is the phase that I'm entering now. Okay? So, now what happens with that phase? I call it death in taxes. It's where we reap the rewards and or consequences of what we did throughout the previous several phases, right? It's the reckoning. Sometimes we see financial gains, financial losses, and we also see the results of how well we've been self-aware or how well we've paid attention to those areas of life. You know, for example, I sort of let my financial, responsibility, care and acuity, I suppose, fall by the wayside. And now I'm having to pick up the pieces, you see? So you probably had to deal with a tax situation, a debt situation, perhaps even death, taxes, inheritance. Maybe you were building up a business, or you were scaling down a business or leaving it behind, you see? These eclipses represent big beginnings and endings. Saturn was going through your 7th house, either bringing distance between you and a partner or in relationships, or strengthening commitments. When I went through that, I actually moved in with an ex-partner of mine at that time. Now, if you are in a relationship, Saturn entering into the 8th house may make you share money with a partner, open a joint bank account. It could also, lead to strain in that relationship. It could lead to a sense of suspicion. It can represent the beginning of the end. Now, my experience was that it more had to do with shared finances, right? And shared losses. It was mingling the money. If you're not in a relationship, it'll feel like a sense of loss. So, if you've had positive things with your money situation, or getting a gift, or tax refunds, or inheritance, or whatever, well, the North Node moved through Aries, that will all be tested. So you need to budget yourself. You need to be honest with yourself about your resources because you will be challenged on them. I recently went through Saturn going through my second house. A little bit different, but similar. As I said, my business was definitely tested. My financial situation was definitely tested. So, what we have to do in the houses that Saturn appears in our charts, is work on tying up the loose ends in that area of life, the things that we didn't handle or didn't pay attention to. So, just be aware of that, sweetheart. Now we're moving on to Libra rising. So Libra rising is the opposite sign of Aries. We've talked a little bit about this. The eclipses were oscillating between the 1st and 7th house, but the North Node was going through your 7th house. So you see, relationships were highlighted. You may have began a new relationship. You may have had a new beginning in a current relationship. You may have had experiences about yourself that changed how you approach relationships. Some people get into monogamy. Some people get into polyamory. Some people reevaluate what relationships mean to them or find out that they need to focus on themselves more. Meanwhile, Saturn has been going through your 6th house, which brings up, health challenges. Excuse me. Monotony at work. I should probably get water. Oh, fuck. I'll have to edit this out. Okay. Because I'm using this for a video later. So anyway, sorry, I was coughing. But relationships were being emphasized in some way. Sometimes we get a new sense of independence that we realize from having dealt with issues of identity in our relationship to ourselves. Sometimes we find out we need more self-care. Meanwhile, Saturn going into that 7th house creates, as I said earlier, distance in relationships, right? It can also create a deepening commitment, as I also said. And this is the final solar eclipse in Aries. So, you may meet someone now over the next 6 months. Remember that the effects of eclipses persist over the subsequent 6 months. Now, the other thing it can do is bring an advantageous end to relationships. You see? Sometimes a relationship is bringing you more pain and strain than good. And that's when you have to decide whether it's worth it. You see, relationships can never be healthy until we're willing to walk away. If we're not willing to walk away, we allow ourselves to be treated all sorts of terrible ways, don't we? And it's out of fear, and that's codependence. So a lot of times we get tested on that sense of codependence. When Saturn goes through the 6th house, it's like we have to take responsibility for life. We have to pick up the pieces that we let just fall away before. And now you could see relationships strained from that sense of hyper-independence. Or as I said again, a deepening of the codependency and all that sort of thing. So whatever you've achieved in terms of independence, a sense of, confidence, a sense of being able to handle your own stuff and being confident in relationships, that will be tested. That will be tested. And you may feel trapped. And you have to figure out what the remedy is for you. Hopefully you have enough communication with your partner where you can discuss these things. But otherwise, you may see things falling apart. But that's up to you, really, and how you respond. Let's move on to the next sign, Scorpio rising. So, now, as I said before, right, the Aries and Libra eclipses, I'd see this was more for Taurus rising, but you see the opposite rising signs will be in the same sort of phase, but with opposite signs, remember? Because the South Node decreases things while the North Node increases them. So while the North Node was going through the sixth house, you may have seen an increase in your health. Maybe you took charge of your health. Maybe you realized that you had to get on an exercise program, start addressing your diet, start addressing your sleep, you know, probably even going to doctors and taking care of, that pain that's been going on forever, right? Meanwhile, Saturn had been going through your fifth house. That's fun, pleasure, sex, and our children. So the likelihood is that since March 2023, you've either had a persistent issue with your kids, if you have kids, or it felt like life just was no fun. Like you weren't able to enjoy yourself. All the things that you used to find enjoyment in became tedious, monotonous, or you just didn't have time for them anymore. Sometimes people get pregnant. Sometimes people have to deal with a negative pregnancy issue, something not very fun. I won't go into that and stress anyone out, but that's the worst permutation, and it's just it shouldn't be something you focus on or worry about. Meanwhile, the North Node, right, switching places with Saturn, means that Saturn's going to test all that health, right? That sense of productivity at work, perhaps even harmony at work. Or if you change jobs, it will make you feel alienated and strained. You may notice that your health and your vitality sort of tank or sink, and you're sort of fighting to keep your energy level up, right? What you have to recognize about this phase is taking care of three things, right? Number one, get enough sleep. Number two, get enough exercise. Number three, get proper nutrition. These are the three, right? It's the three-legged stool of living a productive physical life, right? Also, Saturn going through the sixth house, right? Saturn going through the fifth house made life just, right, no fun. And maybe you were so focused on putting out small fires that you weren't able to enjoy yourself. Meanwhile, Saturn goes into the sixth house. You may find yourself able to have more enjoyment, but you'll also find yourself really sort of overwhelmed with having to pick up the pieces of everything else you let fall by the wayside. Because when Saturn goes to our sixth house, it's like taking responsibility for ourselves and for our lives. And oftentimes we experience a type of hyper-independence as we go through this phase. So just be aware of that, my dear Scorpio rising. Of course, right? You are entering the 11th and 5th house phase of eclipses, though. So hopefully you will see some interesting things having to do with fun, right? When you get to September, we'll talk about that solar eclipse later. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, right? Let's move on to Sagittarius rising. So for Sagittarius rising, that means the eclipses were bouncing back and forth between the 5th and 11th house, of course, because that was the same for Gemini rising. But the emphasis here has been on the 5th house in particular. I joke sometimes that people do get pregnant at that phase. Not always, but sometimes we see that. I know that, I had my kid when Jupiter was going through my 5th house. So, But anyway, that is a possibility. This phase represents coming out into the light of day. However, you are entering, you're entering that manifestation phase here. So you want to be aware of that transition. Saturn has been going through your 4th house, which can bring strains with our parents or our living situation or our private lives. So we could have strains in the relationships with our parents. They may have health issues. They may have persistent problems, maybe even in their own living situations that pop up. Maybe they have to move in with you. I had a client who had to move in with her mom and take care of her, while she was going through this phase. It can also alienate and strain us in our own homes. Sometimes we have people move in with us, right? That pesky sibling of yours that can't keep their shit together, all of a sudden, showing up at your doorstep. Meanwhile, Saturn's going to enter the 5th house and alleviate that area of life. The North Node may have been going through that fifth house and making you feel a bit more fun, pleasure, enjoyment, revitalizing that area of life or increasing it. Now, it could have been negative. You may have been gambling or avoiding responsibilities. But Saturn coming into that fifth house is going to make life a lot less fun. And you will be tested on how well you can maintain a sense of enjoyment, because that's what gives us meaning in life, doesn't it? Life is just not worth living without that sense of enjoyment or fun. Otherwise, what are we doing? We're giving away who we are. We're taking away the zest and the spice of life. And eventually, that does cause problems. It takes away our resolve. It takes away our morale. And it decreases our vitality and our energy. So, you're going to be tested on that. And you want to try and keep that about you. You're going to have to schedule fun time. Schedule self-care time. Schedule time for enjoyment. You need to go to concerts still. You need to go to sporting events. I don't know what you like to do, but you still got to do that stuff in the midst of all these crazy things going on right now. So that's very important stuff, you see. And as I said earlier, you're going to be entering the manifestation phase. It's a time of great activity, you see. So please prepare for that. Ultimately, I think it's all good stuff. But you will probably have a big life direction change after September. But we'll cross that bridge later. Okay, so Capricorn rising, right? The eclipses have been bouncing back and forth between your 10th and 4th house, just like Cancer rising. But the emphasis has been on the 4th house. So you may have seen increases, right? Or abundance coming with your sense of your living situation or your parents. They may have had some interesting luck or windfalls. Or they changed residences, or you've changed residences. Oftentimes we make a significant move, right? Or we have a new experience of our private life. We get a bit more sense of being able to retreat into our comfort. Meanwhile, Saturn's going to enter in there and make your home life very uncomfortable. And I said in the previous thing, people could move in with us. You may have to move in with someone else. You could feel exiled from your home. You could feel like an alien in your own home, right? Like it's not even yours. So prepare for that, because whatever sense the North Node gave you of feeling at home, Saturn is going to sit on it and test that. So I want you to remember that home is wherever you are. If you ever seen The Water Boy, right? The Cajun guy's like, home away you make it, right? Home away you make it. And of course, Adam Sandler says, you like to see homeboys naked? No, home away you make it. Home is where you make it. He's like, it's okay, you like to see homeboys naked, right? But it is. That's what we have to realize. Wherever we are, we can be home, because you are home. For you, not for me, for you, but you know what I'm saying. So anyway, the phase you're entering, though, is the 3rd and 9th house phase of reflection. You may see your voice amplified coming up in the next phase, right? Like I talked about earlier. You may notice an increase in activity in terms of your communication, your siblings, extended family. But as I said, with your ability to get your voice out there, to get your message out there, to get your values and your understanding out there. But let's move ahead to Aquarius rising. This is me and my homies. Remember, it's the opposite sign of Leo. So the houses that were emphasized last time were the 9th and the 3rd, right? As I said, the reflection phase. For me, right, and for Aquarius, the 3rd house was emphasized. As I said earlier, we oftentimes experience an amplification in our voice. We feel like we find our voice. We can get loud, or we can get obnoxious. We start creating content. We start writing, speaking. Once again, disseminating our message. The 9th house helps us to cultivate a message or to discover our ideology or a message. And the 3rd house demands that we share it, right? So what we could have seen with the South Node of the 9th house is your beliefs being challenged or decreased in some day, while your voice was being increased, right? It may have been that you were more against something than more for something. But it's a transitional phase as you figure out the direction you want to go in. So now Saturn has been going through your second house, like for me. So it might have felt like money's been difficult, like you've had to become more frugal. If you have a business, or you're a small business owner like me, you had to organize your finances. You had to start keeping track of your expenses and your balance sheet and all these things that may be really uncomfortable for you. Meanwhile, hopefully we've built a little bit and we've tied up those loose ends and we started keeping a better record of our resources. And then Saturn's going to enter our third house. And she's going to say like, oh yeah, you think you're loud, right? You think you can communicate, right? You think you're well-spoken. You think people are listening. Well, we're going to make it so people aren't listening. Or you feel your voice is stifled. Or, like Ariel in The Little Mermaid. And remember, Ursula took her voice. Ah, ah, ah. Anyway, you know what I'm saying? Ursula took her voice, and that's what it feels like. Right? I said earlier, it might feel like I'm shouting at a brick wall. But what we're being tested on here is our ability, one, to stick to our values, and two, to be able to communicate those through obstacles, right? Especially now, you may be experiencing so much nonsense, lies, and just outright misinformation being peddled right now. So your challenge is going to be how you can counter that and how you can cultivate how you can cultivate a sense of power still in your voice, because you may feel powerless. And remember, in order to feel powerful, you got to actually do things. You have to get out in the streets. You have to make some effort, because the more you sit around just posting or doing stuff on the internet, you're going to feel depressed and dissatisfied. So be aware. I know I have been. And I've gotten more involved lately. So I want you to do the same, because Aquarius rising is all about, the greater good, activism, and standing up for people more vulnerable than you. So get to work. Now, the final sign, Pisces rising, right? So for Pisces rising, the eclipses have been going back and forth between the second and eighth house, right? Sort of the opposite of where I'm going now, right? As an Aquarius rising. But the eclipse is going through your second house could have brought some financial windfalls. Maybe you started a business. Maybe you stopped a business, or, got rid of it, or decided that you had to move on. However, you likely started paying more attention to your financial resources. With the South Node going through the eighth house, you may have seen either relief with taxes and all that sort of thing, or you may have fallen more into debt, right? So you want to be aware of that. Hopefully you've taken care of that situation a bit if it's been an issue. Meanwhile, your money situation is going to get more precarious as Saturn enters your second house, right? During the summer and after this summer, it'll feel like all of a sudden these grim realities about your financial situation are dawning on you. Maybe you've spent too much money. Maybe you need to find that, maybe you found you need to be more frugal. Maybe you found you haven't been keeping track of your expenses and your resources. It's often sort of like a reckoning, you see, where it's waking up from a hangover where we may have spent money like a drunken sailor. I know for me, when I went through this, that I lost a lot of money from starting my business and getting ripped off by accountants and, all kinds of other wackos. So I want you to be aware that you're going to be tested on how well you keep track of your resources. And don't be overly optimistic or pessimistic. Be objective as well as you can. and pay attention. Make yourself a budget. If you don't have a budget, if you're not budgeting yourself, then you're not going to do very well. That should be a priority after May, okay? And remember, the eclipse phase that you're going into is going to be the 1st and 7th house phase. So Saturn had been going through your 1st house, messing with your sense of identity, right? Making you feel a sense of feeling old or mature, maybe depressed or melancholy, changing your appearance in some way. Maybe you lost weight. But what we learn through this phase is to face parts of ourselves that we never dealt with, right? The North Node going into Pisces, though, hopefully will help give you some confidence and bring back that sense of identity, to reconstruct it for you. So anyway, I hope all this stuff was useful. Okay. Remember to subscribe on YouTube. Remember, I give the best readings. There's an outro that's going to be here when I finally post this. In the meantime, this will be posted as a live. So I hope it's useful and you can refer back to it. And I want you to contemplate what this could mean for you, and to really sit back and analyze and reflect on what's happened between March of 2023 and now, in whatever whole sign house Aries is for you. Okay? Remember, I'm the best astrologer. I'm wonderful. I'm great. Yada, yada, yada. I say a bunch of vain things all the time because I get to do that. So anyway, I love you all very much. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and I hope you have a great eclipse. I mean, when I'm recording this, it's tomorrow. So anyway, love y'all very much. Have a wonderful, wonderful